The Gospel of Luke, chapter 5. Have you ever found yourself at the edge of exhaustion, where your efforts seem futile, and you're left wondering if all the hard work is even worth it? Maybe you've been toiling away in your career, trying to heal a relationship, or striving for personal growth, only to feel like you've hit a wall. It's easy to feel like giving up when nothing seems to be working. But I believe that in these moments, when we feel like quitting, God is calling us to something deeper. Today, we're going to dive into the story found in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 5, where Jesus transforms a situation of failure into one of miraculous abundance. In this story, we'll see how God uses moments of struggle to call us to deeper faith and trust, and how stepping out in faith can lead to life-changing results. In the Gospel of Luke, chapter 5, Jesus finds himself by the lake of Gennesaret, also known as the Sea of Galilee. A large crowd is gathered around him, eager to hear his teaching. Nearby, a group of fishermen, including Simon Peter, are cleaning their nets after a long, exhausting night. They had worked tirelessly, but caught nothing. Could you imagine the frustration they must have felt? These were professional fishermen, experienced in their trade, yet they had nothing to show for all their efforts. They were ready to pack up and go home. But then Jesus steps into Simon's boat and asks him to push out a little from the shore so he can teach the crowd. Simon, though weary, agrees. After teaching the people, Jesus turns to Simon and makes a request that doesn't seem to make sense. He says, "Put out into deep water and let down your nets for a catch." Now, let's pause here for one moment. Picture the scene. Simon Peter is an experienced fisherman. He knows the waters, the best time to fish, and the techniques that usually work. He also knows that daytime is not the ideal time for fishing in deep water. Everything in Simon's expertise probably told him that what Jesus was asking didn't make sense. After all, they had just finished cleaning their nets after an unsuccessful night. Why go through the trouble of trying again, especially in broad daylight? But Simon Peter doesn't argue. Instead, he responds, "Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything, but because you say so, I will let down the nets." Now, this is a pivotal moment. Simon doesn't rely on his own understanding. He trusts Jesus' word. This is our first key lesson. Sometimes God asks us to obey, even when it doesn't make sense to us. And you know, obedience is not always about understanding. It's about trust. In our own lives, we may face situations where we feel like we know better, where our experience tells us one thing, but God is calling us to something else. In those moments, we're faced with a choice. Will we trust in our own knowledge, or will we trust in God's wisdom? Now, Jesus doesn't just ask Simon to cast his nets again. He asks him to go into the deep. Now, deep water can represent the unknown, the areas of life where we feel uncomfortable, unprepared, or even fearful. It's easy to stay in the shallow waters where we can see the bottom and feel safe. But it's in the deep waters where true growth and transformation happen. Now, stepping into the deep requires faith because it's a place where we have to let go of our own control. Think about the deep waters in your own life. Maybe it's starting a new job or business, mending a broken relationship, taking a step of faith in your spiritual journey, or pursuing a long-held dream that seems out of reach. Jesus is calling each of us to trust him in those deep waters. Now, this leads us to our second key lesson. Faith often requires us to step into the unknown, to leave the safety of the shore, and trust that God will provide even when we can't see how. Now Simon Peter obeys. He casts his nets into the deep, and what happens next is nothing short of miraculous. The nets are filled with so many fish that they begin to break. Simon calls for his partners, James and John, to come and help, and even then, the catch is so overwhelming that both boats begin to sink from the weight of the fish. Now, this is where we see the power of obedience and faith in action. When we follow God's lead, even in situations that seem hopeless, He has the power to bring about results that go far beyond anything we could ever achieve on our own. Now, the abundance of fish was more than Simon Peter and his partners could have imagined, and it was a direct result of obeying Jesus' command. The lesson here is clear. When we trust and obey God, we open the door for Him to work miracles in our lives. The provision may not always look the way we expect, but God's abundance often exceeds our greatest hopes. Now, in the midst of the miraculous catch, something even more profound happens. Simon Peter falls at Jesus' knees and says, "Go away from me, Lord. I am a sinful man." Why does Simon react this way? Well, in this moment, he realizes that he is in the presence of someone far greater than he ever imagined. The miracle wasn't just about fish. It was about revealing who Jesus truly is. But Jesus doesn't turn Simon away. Instead, he says, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you will fish for people." And from that moment, Simon Peter, along with James and John, leave everything behind to follow Jesus. Now, this leads us to our final key point. Jesus meets us where we are, but He calls us to something greater. Simon Peter was a fisherman by trade, but Jesus saw in him the potential to be a leader, a disciple, someone who would impact the lives of countless others. Jesus sees beyond our current circumstances and calls us to a higher purpose. So as we close, let's reflect on the story of Simon Peter and the miraculous catch of fish. Where in your life is Jesus calling you to put out into the deep? Maybe you've been working hard and doing everything you know to do, but you're still coming up empty. Or maybe you feel like you're being asked to step into something that seems too big, too unknown, or too risky. Remember this: God doesn't call us to the deep to leave us there. He calls us to the deep because that's where His miracles happen. When we trust Him, when we obey His word, even when it seems like it doesn't make sense, He provides in ways we can't imagine. So, as you leave here today, I want you to ask yourself, what is the deep water in my life? And am I willing to step into it? The miracles you've been waiting for may be just beyond your comfort zone, waiting for you to trust, obey, and cast your nets into the deep. So, let's step out in faith and see what God will do. Thank you. I hope you have a beautiful day, friends. Tomorrow we'll discuss the Gospel of Luke, chapter 6. Take care.